Welcome, friends, wherever you are listening from tonight. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this, a city wrapped in mist. The air is damp, cold enough to sting your breath, and every sound seems to echo a little longer than it should. You stand on a cobblestone street, and the world feels slower, softer, as if the night itself is holding its breath. This is London. Sometime in the late 19th century, gas lamps glow like sleepy eyes along the streets, their yellow halos flickering in the fog. Carriage wheels roll in the distance, muffled by the thick air. From far away, a church bell strikes deep and low, reminding the city that another hour has passed, though time feels uncertain here. Tonight is not just any night. It is Halloween, or, as people of the age called it, All Hallows' Eve, a night the Victorians believed belonged partly to the living and partly to those who had gone before. In a world that still carried superstition in its bones, this was a time to listen, because, if you were quiet enough, the city itself might whisper back. The Victorian age loved progress, steam engines, printing presses, scientific revolutions. Yet beneath that confident surface, there was something else. Something quieter, more human. London was a city of light and shadow, of new machines and old ghosts. Every invention illuminated one street, while casting another into deeper darkness. Picture it, long rows of narrow houses, their windows glowing faintly from within, the smell of coal smoke and rain, the click of shoes on stone. In the fog, everything blurs, edges fade, and imagination begins to fill the gaps. Perhaps that is why ghost stories thrived here. When you can't see clearly, the mind paints its own picture. Writers, poets, and dreamers of that time often described London's fog as alive, a creature with breath and memory. Charles Dickens once wrote that it crept into houses and curled around lamps, as if it wanted to be part of every conversation. And on nights like this, the fog did not just hide the streets, it seemed to listen to them. Today, we celebrate Halloween, with costumes and laughter, with bright lights and sweet treats. But in Victorian times, it carried a very different meaning. To them, it was a threshold, the edge between seasons, between life and memory. Families lit candles in windows, not to frighten anyone, but to guide spirits home for one night of peace. Children whispered old rhymes for good luck, and adults, even those who called themselves modern, often paused when the wind sighed through their chimneys, wondering if it carried something more than air. There was beauty in that belief, not the fear of monsters, but the gentle respect for what lingers unseen. Victorians lived close to mystery. Life was fragile, light was precious, and memory was sacred. So when Halloween came, they treated it as a night of remembrance, not simply fright, a night to reflect on what had passed and what still remained quietly in the heart of the city. If you listen carefully, you can almost hear it, the rhythm beneath the streets. London on such a night seems to breathe. Each lamp flicker feels like a heartbeat, each footstep a pulse in the city's veins. The fog rolls like thought, heavy, deliberate, and full of secrets. In that stillness, you might notice details you never see by day, the pattern of raindrops glistening on iron railings, the way smoke curls upward only to vanish, the faint warmth radiating from bakery doors as workers prepare the next morning's bread. It is not frightening, it is intimate, a reminder that every stone, every sound, every soul contributes to the great living memory of a city. That is where our story begins, in that space between quiet and movement, between what is seen and what is merely felt. The story tonight is not about fear or horror. It is about remembrance, about the idea that every city, every life holds echoes, waiting to be heard. So before we go further, take a breath. Let the fog settle around you in your mind. The lights are dim. The room is still. And outside your window, the night is wide and patient. You are safe here, but the imagination is free to wander. Think of Halloween not as a night of fright, but as a night of listening. A time when we open ourselves to the stories left behind, the dreams, hopes, and quiet moments that built the world before ours. The London we are entering is not the bustling metropolis of today. This one moves to the slow rhythm of horses, hooves, and flickering lamps. The people here do not rush. They move through mist like ghosts themselves, wrapped in shawls, coats, and thoughts. They know that life is brief, and that memory is the only true permanence. As we step into this imagined past, you might feel that the air thickens slightly, not with fear, but with history. The scent of smoke and candle wax, the chill of damp stone, the sound of a river breathing beneath bridges. Somewhere in that fog, a clock strikes again. 1, 2, 3. Each toll fading softer into the mist, and then a figure. A tall man walking alone through the street, his coat brushing against the wet cobbles. He does not hurry. His hat is pulled low, and his steps make no sound. The fog parts for him, just a little, as if it knows him or remembers him. He carries no weapon, no visible burden, only purpose. In the silence, even his heartbeat might echo against the walls. A lamp flickers behind him, and for a brief second his shadow stretches far ahead, long and uncertain, as though leading him somewhere he is already. Ben, we do not know his name. Not yet, but we will follow him, and so, as the clock continues to strike, and the fog grows thicker, our story begins a journey through London's forgotten corners, where memory has weight, and the past still whispers beneath the stone. This is not the London of newspapers and palaces. It is the London of whispers, footsteps, and the faint glow of lanterns that refuse to die. It is a place where history breathes through cracks in the wall, where even the air feels aware of its own age. Tonight, we will walk those streets together, not to chase ghosts, but to listen to them, because every haunting is, in its heart, a memory asking to be heard. The fog in London was never just weather. To the Victorians, it was almost a living creature, unpredictable, mysterious, and strangely intimate. It moved with its own will, hiding what it wished and revealing what it pleased. Tonight, as we follow our lone traveler through the lamplit streets, the fog is more than a backdrop. It is a silent character, one that breathes, remembers, and perhaps even guides. He walks slowly, his boots brushing against the slick stones. The fog thickens and thins, folding around him like fabric. Sometimes it clings to his coat, as if trying to hold him back. Other times it parts briefly, revealing a faint glow from a window or a passing carriage. Yet no sound truly breaks the quiet. The city's heartbeat has slowed, and everything moves in rhythm with the mist. This fog, this living haze, is more than atmosphere. It is the city's veil, both concealing and protecting. It covers the worn bricks and narrow alleys that polite society prefers to forget. Behind it lie the stories that never made the papers, the lost, the lonely, the ordinary souls whose footsteps once echoed through these same streets. The fog hides them, but it also keeps them. It is memory made visible. As the man continues, he passes the outlines of buildings that seem to shift with the mist. A bakery, its windows glowing faintly. A church spire disappearing into gray, the glint of iron railings wet with dew. Shapes blur together until you can no longer tell where one shadow ends and another begins. The fog turns the familiar into something dreamlike, and in that dream, truth begins to surface. Victorian Londoners had a complicated relationship with their famous fog. To some, it was a menace, a choking smog born from coal and industry, thick enough to hide danger in plain sight. To others, it was a kind of beauty, softening the city's harsh edges, turning its chaos into poetry. Writers described it as smoke made holy, an element that gave the city its soul. Painters tried to capture it, Turner, Whistler, Monet, but none could paint the way it felt. It was not only seen, it was experienced. The fog blurred class boundaries, too. On nights like this, you could not tell a gentleman from a laborer, a scholar from a thief. All silhouettes looked the same in the haze. In that sense, the fog was an equalizer. It swallowed status, leaving only the outline of a human figure moving through uncertainty. And perhaps that is what made it unsettling. When everything looks the same, we are forced to confront what lies beneath appearance. Our traveler pauses beneath a flickering gas lamp. The light fights to stay alive, its flame bending and snapping in the damp air. For a moment he looks upward. Droplets glisten on the rim of his hat. The fog swirls, and within its folds, faint impressions take shape, faces that are not there, hands that dissolve when you blink. Are they tricks of the eye, or echoes of those who once stood in this very place? In this London, memory is not silent. It manifests faint, soft, insistent. A child's laughter drifts briefly through the air, distant and hollow. The man turns, but the street is empty. Only the fog remains, breathing steadily. The sound could have been imagination, or maybe the city remembering something tender from long ago. There is a certain peace in that thought, that the places we inhabit keep traces of us. Every step leaves a mark, not on stone, but on the unseen fabric of the world. The fog, dense and sensitive, might simply be the world's way of revealing those invisible marks for a moment. Like a photograph developing in slow motion, it shows us outlines of what once was. The Victorians, with all their fascination for the unseen, would have understood this deeply. They held seances, studied spirit photography, and filled their parlors with talk of ghosts. But beneath the fascination was something gentler, the yearning to believe that nothing truly disappears, that a voice once spoken, a life once lived, might still leave a trace, however faint. The fog became a symbol of that yearning, not just a physical phenomenon, but a bridge between now and then, presence and absence. The traveler keeps moving. The sound of his boots fades and reappears, echoing softly off the brick. The air grows thicker. The world narrows to a few feet ahead. There is no clear path now, only instinct and trust in the faint golden glow ahead. It is in these moments when sight fails that people begin to feel more keenly. The fog forces him to listen, to the soft hiss of gas lamps, the dripping of water, the hum of distant life. The city speaks in subtle ways. When he reaches a crossing, he hesitates. The street divides. One way leads toward the sound of the river, the other toward silence. He closes his eyes briefly, as if asking the fog itself for direction, and perhaps, in its quiet way, it answers, A gentle shift in the mist opens a narrow path, glowing faintly in the lamp's reflection. He follows. As he walks, his shadow stretches and collapses, reshaped by the uneven light. The fog thickens again, swallowing detail, yet it feels less like an obstacle and more like a guide. It is as though the city wants him to see only what matters, to feel, not analyze. That is the strange gift of fog. It removes clarity, but grants depth. It invites us to move through uncertainty, to trust emotion over sight. From a modern point of view, we might see the fog as pollution, as the byproduct of an industrial city, but in the poetic sense, it becomes something else, a metaphor for memory and emotion. The mind, after all, has its own fog. We forget names, blur events, soften sharp details. Yet in that blur, the essence remains. Sometimes memory, like London's fog, hides the pain, but leaves the glow a soft focus that lets us look at the past without fear. The man stops again. The silence feels deeper here. He takes a slow breath. The fog curls into his lungs, cool and heavy. It feels ancient, as though he is inhaling time itself. He places his hand on a cold wall, and for a heartbeat imagines it pulsing faintly beneath his touch. The city feels alive, old, patient, remembering. A whisper rises somewhere behind him, but when he turns, there is nothing, only mist. Still, he smiles faintly. Not everything unseen is meant to alarm us. Some things exist simply to remind us that we are part of something vast and continuous. A story that began long before we arrived, and will continue long after we are gone. As he resumes his slow walk, the camera of imagination pans upward, rooftops dissolving into fog, lamps glowing like stars trapped near the ground, the city breathing in long, rhythmic sighs. From this height, London looks less like a city and more like a living organism, veins of light, arteries of smoke, and a mind made of memory. And somewhere, deep inside that living mind, the traveler's path glows faintly, another story unfolding. Another echo recorded, "Tonight, the fog is not just covering London, it is telling it, revealing its hidden pulse, its buried sorrow, and its quiet beauty." In the glow of the gas lamps and the hush of the fog, the traveler keeps walking, but something subtle has changed. The night feels aware, as if it has turned its gaze upon him. He moves through streets where time folds back on itself, and every echo seems to carry voices from another age. It is All Hallows' Eve, the night the Victorians called the boundary between the living and the departed. And on this night, belief itself feels alive. Victorian Londoners were not strangers to the unseen. They lived in an age of rapid progress, telegraphs humming across continents, trains roaring through tunnels, medicine advancing faster than ever, and yet even the most rational minds could not shake the fascination with what lay beyond. Ghost stories were not just entertainment, they were part of how people made sense of life and death. For every discovery in science, there remained an equal mystery in the soul. All Hallows' Eve, or Halloween, was woven from centuries of older traditions. It carried remnants of Samhain, the ancient Celtic festival marking the end of harvest and the beginning of the darker half of the year. It was said that on this night, the veil between the worlds grew thin, that the spirits of the dead might return, seeking warmth, memory, or unfinished words. The Victorians, with their deep sense of ritual and sentiment, embraced that idea not with terror, but with tenderness. In the city, people still lit candles in their windows. Some placed bowls of milk or bread on the doorstep, small offerings to wandering souls. Others wrote letters to the departed, tucking them into drawers or under pillows, believing that perhaps they could be read in dreams. Even those who called themselves skeptics would pause when a chill wind passed through the room, or when a candle guttered suddenly without reason. In an era of invention, mystery still had a place. Our traveler turns down another street. Through the fog, faint strains of a tune drift from an open window. A violin playing softly. Perhaps at a small gathering, inside, a family might be telling ghost stories by firelight. That was a common pastime in Victorian households, the telling of tales when the nights grew long. It was not simply for fright. It was a way to feel close to those who were gone, to acknowledge that the past never truly leaves us. Writers of the age knew this well. Charles Dickens, Elizabeth Gaskell, Sheridan Le Fanu, and many others filled pages with spirits that were not just terrifying, but sorrowful beings trapped between worlds, longing for closure. Their stories often ended not with screams, but with understanding. Ghosts, in the Victorian imagination, were not monsters. They were memories with a heartbeat. The traveler pauses at a small square. The air is still, except for the rustling of leaves caught in an eddy of fog. There is a bench near a crooked tree, its branches bare. On it lies a single candle, its flame steady despite the wind. Someone has left it burning, perhaps as an offering, perhaps as a message. In its glow, the fog seems to shimmer, like a curtain stirred by unseen hands. He sits for a moment, watching the flame. In its reflection, the world feels doubled, both present and distant. And he wonders, what if the Victorians were right? What if, for a single night each year, the wall between now and then grows thin enough for memory to step through, not as terror, but as recognition, a reunion between the living and the echoes they carry. In those days, Londoners spoke openly of such things. Spiritualism had become almost fashionable. Parlors hosted seances lit by candlelight, with crystal glasses trembling as if touched by invisible fingers. Families grieving loved ones sought comfort in the idea that death was not an end but a crossing. Mediums and scientists alike claimed to detect signs, flickering lights, moving curtains, whispered names. For some it was hope, for others deception, but for everyone it proved one thing: no invention could outshine the longing to connect. Even Queen Victoria herself, mourning her beloved Albert, turned toward mediums and private rituals of remembrance. She wore black for decades, kept his rooms untouched, and often spoke of sensing his presence near her. Her grief became a reflection of a nation's collective heart, one that beat with both progress and nostalgia. And so, on nights like this, when the fog wraps the city in silence, you can almost feel that duality, the balance between the material and the mystical. The Victorians lived in a world of contrasts: electric light and candle flame, laboratories and seance rooms, factories and church bells. Halloween for them was not about fear, it was about acknowledgement. An acceptance that the world was vast, layered, and full of quiet company. The traveler stands again, the candlelight flickering against his coat. The fog swirls softly around his legs as he begins to move once more. Ahead, the city stretches bridges, crossing black water, towers piercing the gray. In every window, a different story glows faintly: a family at supper, a nurse tending a patient, a writer bent over a candle, drafting a tale about ghosts. And outside, the streets hold the breath of them all. In modern times, we often treat Halloween as spectacle masks, costumes, bright colors, and noise. But if we listen closely, its roots still whisper the same message: remembrance. The idea that for one night the boundary softens, and the past can speak gently through flickering light or drifting wind. The Victorians might have believed in ghosts, but what they really believed in was connection, the invisible thread between hearts, stretched across time. As the traveler walks, he imagines that thread countless strands weaving through fog, binding every soul who ever lived in this city. The child who once played by the river, the mother who watched the lamp from her window each night, the worker who carried coal through the cold dawn. None are lost entirely. The city remembers them, and the fog carries their breath. He reaches the end of the square, where the street narrows again. The candle's light fades behind him, but its warmth remains. Ahead, another lamp glows faintly, drawing him forward, as if the city itself is leading him deeper into its memory. The fog folds close again, and in its soft embrace he feels not fear, but reverence. Because in the heart of Victorian London, belief was not about escaping death. It was about cherishing life, the kind of life that leaves traces, that refuses to be forgotten. And on All Hallows' Eve, those traces gather quietly in the mist, reminding us that the past is never truly gone. It simply waits in the hush between footsteps, in the shimmer of fog, in the candle left burning on an empty bench. And tonight our traveler walks among them, guided not by fear, but by wonder. The fog deepens now, turning from silver gray to something thicker, almost tangible. Gas lamps along the street burn like small trembling suns, their light barely reaching beyond an arm's length. The city seems to hold its breath again, as though waiting for something or someone. And then, out of the mist, he appears. At first, only the shape of him is visible. Tall, deliberate, his outline dissolving and reforming as the fog moves. His boots strike the cobblestones in a rhythm that seems too steady to belong to chance. The cloak he wears flows just above the ground, its edges darkened by damp air. The brim of his hat casts a shadow across his face, but one thing is clear: he walks as though the streets belong to him, or perhaps as though he knows them far too well. The traveler, our stranger, moves through the haze with quiet purpose. He is neither hurried nor lost. Each step feels chosen, like he is tracing a path only he can see. London, that vast maze of alleys and echoes, bends slightly around him. It is as if the fog itself parts to make way. To those few still awake at this hour, he is merely another shadow among many. A carriage driver, guiding his horse through the mist, glimpses him briefly and lowers his eyes. A woman hurrying home from the bakery crosses to the opposite side of the street, without quite knowing why. Even the night watchman, lantern swinging at his side, pauses when he hears the faint echo of steps and feels something unexplainable in the air, a sensation both heavy and familiar. There is no malice in the stranger's presence, but there is weight, a gravity that pulls at attention. He does not seek to be noticed, yet everything around him seems to notice anyway. Cats freeze mid-step. A window curtain stirs, though no breeze touches it. The fog thickens, then thins, like a living thing breathing in rhythm with his stride. He turns down Fleet Street, where the lamps grow sparser and the world seems older. The walls close in, bricks blackened by coal soot. Faded signs hang above shuttered doors. Tailor and Sons, bookbinder, apothecary. All quiet now, their trades asleep. The echo of the stranger's steps slides between the buildings, sounding at times near, at times impossibly far. as though the city itself is repeating his walk beneath the stones. For a moment he stops beneath a lamp and looks upward. The faint orange glow reflects off his coat buttons, tiny circles of light, swallowed almost immediately by fog. From this close, one might notice his hands pale, gloved, motionless at his sides, not clenched, not fidgeting, merely waiting. He seems to be listening to something only he can hear. Then, from somewhere down the street, comes a sound, a distant toll of a church bell, slow, resonant, and strangely uneven. 1, 2, 3. The traveler lowers his head slightly, as though in acknowledgement. To him, this is no ordinary sound. It is a signal, or perhaps a memory. The bell fades, but he does not move immediately. Around him, the fog ripples with subtle motion, like water disturbed by an unseen hand. The light bends strangely in the mist. For an instant, shapes seem to flicker, silhouettes of people that vanish as soon as you try to focus on them. A woman in a bonnet, a man carrying a walking stick, a child clutching a toy, none solid, all dissolving. The stranger does not react. He simply begins walking again, deeper into the narrowing lane, where the lamps end and only darkness remains. It is here that London changes character. The grandeur of the city, its towers and cathedrals, fades behind him. What lies ahead is smaller, quieter, alleys so tight they barely admit two people side by side, walls damp with centuries of breath. A cat darts across his path, its eyes flashing like coins before it disappears into the dark. The ground gleams faintly with puddles that reflect nothing. He moves forward, the sound of his boots the only rhythm left. In this silence, even that feels intrusive, each step a soft reminder that he belongs to the living world, while everything around him seems to hover somewhere else. At one corner, he pauses before a row of tenements. A faint light flickers in one upper window, the glow of a single candle. Behind the glass, an old woman is bent over a table, lips moving in prayer. The stranger watches for a moment, expression unreadable. Then he touches the brim of his hat, almost like a gesture of respect, before turning away. The fog swirls thickly as he moves. There is a kind of ceremony in his pace, unhurried, solemn, like a priest in procession. When he passes under a broken archway, the air seems to cool by a few degrees. The smell changes too, from damp stone to something older, earthy, metallic. The city's scent deepens, carrying traces of river mud and iron. The traveler pauses again, gloved hand brushing the wall beside him. The brick beneath his fingers feels warm, though no sun has touched it for hours. He closes his eyes briefly, listening. The city hums faintly, a low vibration that seems to come not from above, but from below. Perhaps from tunnels, or from something more mysterious still, the echo of what London keeps buried. He opens his eyes. The fog shifts again, and for a brief heartbeat the street looks almost transparent. Beneath it, impossible yet clear, lies another London, older, ghost-like, narrow lanes built over centuries ago, filled with the faint silhouettes of people long gone. Vendors calling out, children running, horses clattering. The soundless film of a city remembering itself. Then the vision fades, swallowed by mist. The traveler exhales slowly and begins walking once more. Who is he? A historian tracing forgotten paths, a restless spirit walking the streets of his own memory, or simply a man too curious to fear the unknown? The story does not tell us yet, and perhaps that is the point. Mystery is its own kind of mirror. He turns another corner and stops. Ahead, the street ends abruptly in a small, crooked square, its center dominated by an old water pump leaning slightly to one side. The air here feels heavier, almost sacred. A single figure stands at the far end, holding a lantern, its flame small but steady. The stranger watches in silence. The lantern-bearer hesitates, the light trembling slightly in his hand. He can't yet see the man clearly, only his outline framed by the fog. Still, he feels something shift in the air, a faint pressure, a stirring of breath, as though the city itself has awakened to watch this meeting. The stranger takes one final step forward, and the fog curls back as if yielding ground. Two silhouettes face one another across the square, one trembling, one utterly still. Between them, the fog ripples softly, not as air, but as water disturbed by memory. And in that suspended moment, the story begins to change. The city's breath deepens, the lamps flicker, and a whisper rises from somewhere unseen, the first voice of what London remembers. The stranger steps forward, and the lantern-bearer instinctively retreats a pace. Between them, the fog thickens, drifting like a slow tide that hides and reveals in rhythm. The square behind fades, until even the lamps become pale ghosts of light, swallowed whole by grayness. Only the faint, trembling glow of the lantern remains a fragile heartbeat in the dark. Without a word, the stranger gestures toward a narrow opening between two leaning brick walls. The entrance is half hidden by shadows, its mouth just wide enough for one man to pass at a time. The lantern-bearer hesitates, glancing back as if weighing whether to flee. But the street behind has disappeared into the fog. There is nowhere else to go, so he lifts the lantern a little higher and follows. The alley receives them like a secret. The ground here is uneven, slick with damp, and scattered with fragments of broken glass. Overhead, ropes and laundry lines crisscross the sky, their silhouettes faintly visible against the dim light above. Drops of water cling to them, falling every few seconds, soft, rhythmic, like a ticking clock. The air smells of rain and coal and something metallic, sharp and old, as if the walls themselves exhale memory. Every few steps, the lantern-bearer glances around nervously. "It is colder here," he mutters under his breath, his voice half swallowed by fog. The stranger does not answer. His silence feels deliberate, as if words might break something delicate. The alley narrows further. It twists and bends in unnatural ways, like a tunnel carved by accident rather than design. The bricks glisten as though freshly wet, but the rain stopped hours ago. Somewhere in the distance, water drips steadily, a faint, eternal sound that feels older than the city itself. From an upper window, a scrap of faded curtain stirs. The lantern-bearer raises his light, but the window is empty. No face looks back. No movement remains. Still, the feeling lingers, the sense of having been seen. The stranger stops suddenly. He crouches slightly, his hand brushing the ground where a small puddle has formed. The water trembles, though no wind touches it. In the reflection, the lantern-bearer glimpses not two figures, but many fleeting outlines gathered close, faces half-formed, eyes glinting like the shimmer of candlelight beneath the surface. When he blinks, they are gone. "What is this place?" he whispers. The stranger straightens slowly, his coat brushing the wet wall. "It is a passage," he says at last, his voice calm and low. "Not of streets, but of time." The lantern-bearer frowns, unsure whether he has heard correctly. The stranger continues forward, without waiting for a reply. They pass doorways sealed with wooden boards, walls marked by chalk symbols whose meanings have long been forgotten. The faint outline of an old sign still clings to the brick Bakers & Sons, 1824, though the shop itself has long since vanished. The city builds over its past, layer upon layer, but here in this alley, the old London breathes again. As they go deeper, the air thickens further. Sounds become muffled, as though the fog itself absorbs them. Even the stranger's footsteps fade into near silence. The only light comes from the small lantern, its golden glow pushing back the gray in a narrow circle. Beyond it, the mist moves, not drifting aimlessly, but shifting in slow, deliberate patterns. At one point, the lantern-bearer thinks he sees movement ahead, a faint figure crossing the alley. But when he raises the light, there is nothing, only fog curling upward in a shape that could almost be human. He exhales sharply. "Are we alone?" he asks. The stranger pauses, his voice calm. "No one is ever alone in London," he says softly. "Every breath you take, someone once took before you in the same place, in another age." The words linger, absorbed by the air. The alley feels denser now, as if listening. They pass under a broken archway, its stone slick with moss. The smell changes, a mix of earth and something sweet, like old wood smoke or faded perfume. The lantern light catches on bits of metal embedded in the wall, nails, coins, fragments of things buried and forgotten. The city keeps its memories close, locked within brick and mortar. At one corner, the alley widens just enough to reveal a small courtyard. A single lamppost stands there, leaning slightly, its glass cracked but still faintly glowing. Beneath it, the fog swirls in slow motion, and within that motion, shapes begin to form, outlines of people gathered together. A man tipping his hat, a woman adjusting her shawl, a child clutching a wooden toy. They stand without sound, like faded photographs briefly brought to life. The lantern-bearer gasps. His grip tightens on the handle. The stranger steps forward, unafraid. "They are not here to harm," he says quietly. "They are here because they cannot leave." The fog figures ripple gently, like reflections on disturbed water. For a moment one turns a woman's face, pale and still, eyes full of longing. Her lips move, forming words that do not reach the ear. Then she fades, absorbed again into mist. The lantern-bearer's voice shakes. "Are they ghosts?" The stranger's reply is slow. "Not in the way you think. They are memories. The city's way of remembering those who built it. Each shadow a story. Each whisper a life once lived. London forgets nothing. It only hides." The courtyard grows quieter still. Even the dripping water has stopped. The fog pulses faintly, as if the alley itself is breathing. The lantern-bearer looks at the stranger. "Why bring me here?" "To see," the stranger replies, "not with your eyes, with your understanding." For a long moment, neither speaks. The lantern's flame flickers once, then steadies. In its light, the mist seems to thin, revealing tiny details the fog had hidden, initials carved into a wall, the outline of a door sealed long ago, a child's drawing scratched into stone, a sun, a house, a name too faint to read, signs of life, preserved in silence. The stranger turns toward the far end of the courtyard, where another passage waits, narrower, darker, the fog almost solid there. Beyond this, he says softly, lies what the city truly remembers. The lantern-bearer swallows hard. "And what if I do not want to see it?" The stranger glances back, his expression unreadable. Then the city will keep its secrets a while longer, he says, but it will not forget that you turned away. For a moment, the two men stand facing each other, the air heavy with choice. The lantern's glow reflects faintly in the stranger's eyes, calm, ancient, endless. Then, without waiting for an answer, he steps into the dark. The lantern-bearer hesitates only a moment before following. The fog swallows them both, the last trace of light flickering, then vanishing. And behind them, the alley sighs not with wind, but with memory. The sound is soft, almost tender, like the closing of a book that knows it will be opened again. The alley seems to twist upon itself, folding the world into narrower and narrower passages, until even sound hesitates to move forward. The lantern flickers softly, its glow beating like a small heart against the surrounding gray. The stranger walks with steady rhythm, and the lantern-bearer follows, each footstep slower than the last. The air is colder here, not the chill of night, but something deeper, the kind that sinks into bone. The fog has changed, too. It no longer drifts aimlessly. It swirls with purpose, spiraling gently, as though drawn by invisible breath. And then, without warning, the stranger stops. Ahead of them, the alley opens into a small square space, bounded by walls that tilt slightly inward. In the center stands an old iron lamp-post, its glass shattered, its light long dead. The ground beneath it glistens faintly with moisture, reflecting the trembling flame of the lantern in the lantern-bearer's hand. The stranger turns to him. "Hold it steady," he says quietly. The lantern-bearer nods, trying to keep his grip from shaking. The light wavers across the stones, revealing shapes carved faintly into the wall, circles, crosses, and symbols too worn to decipher. They shimmer faintly in the fog, as if remembering the hands that made them. "Why have we stopped?" the lantern-bearer whispers. "Because this is where the city begins to speak," the stranger replies. His voice carries a stillness that feels almost ceremonial. He steps closer to the broken lamp-post and rests his gloved hand on the rusted iron. The lantern-bearer watches, unsure what he expects to happen, but the air seems to grow denser, as though the fog itself is listening. Then, softly, the lamp-post hums. It is not a sound that comes from metal. It is lower, older, a vibration that moves through the ground and into the air, as if the earth beneath London is stirring from a long sleep. The lantern-bearer's breath quickens. The flame quivers violently, stretching upward, as though drawn by the unseen pulse. The fog begins to shift, slowly at first, then in spirals that circle the post, and within that spiraling mist, a shape begins to form. It starts as a ripple of light, faint, unsteady, like a reflection on moving water. Then it thickens, gathering shadows and soft outlines until a figure stands before them. It has no clear edges. Its form seems to breathe in and out with the fog, one moment almost human, the next a drifting cloud. But the face, or what passes for a face, flickers through countless expressions, as if 1,000 lives were flashing through it in silence. The lantern-bearer staggers back, his hand trembling so violently that the flame nearly goes out. The stranger lifts his own hand calmly, signaling him to stay still. "Do not fear," he murmurs. "It is not a ghost, as you imagine it." The apparition tilts its head slightly, as though listening. The fog thickens around its chest, and when it exhales, the air itself seems to whisper a chorus of half-formed voices, layered and distant. Some sound like laughter, some like tears. The words are indistinct, but their emotion is unmistakable, longing. The lantern-bearer forces himself to breathe. What is it?" he asks. The stranger's eyes never leave the figure. "It is the city remembering," he says. "The past does not die here. It gathers. Every step taken, every voice spoken, every dream buried beneath stone, all of it lingers. And sometimes the city breathes it out again." The apparition's glow pulses faintly, as if acknowledging the words. Around its form, the mist swirls faster, fragments of faces flickering in and out, a woman's sorrow, a child's smile, a man's weary gaze. They overlap and dissolve, weaving together like strands of history. The lantern-bearer can feel the hum in his chest now, vibrating through the air, gentle but insistent. His fear softens, replaced by something else, awe. He lowers the lantern slightly, and for a moment he thinks the figure looks at him directly. There is no malice in that gaze, no threat, only quiet recognition. "They know we are here," the stranger says softly, "not because we disturb them, but because we remember, and remembrance gives them shape." The figure drifts closer, its form wavering. It stops just a few feet away, light flickering faintly along its edges. The lantern-bearer's throat tightens. His instinct is to step back, but he cannot move. The air feels charged, yet calm, the same stillness one feels before dawn. The apparition raises one arm, or something like an arm, and points toward the wall behind them. The stranger turns, and for the first time, the lantern-bearer sees what he had missed, an outline of a door drawn faintly on the brick, half erased by time. "It wants us to see," the stranger murmurs. The city hides its memory in layers, like sediment. Every door like this leads to another fragment of what once was. The lantern-bearer swallows hard. "You mean, there is something behind there?" "Not something," the stranger says. "Someone's memory." The figure's light flickers once more, then begins to fade, dissolving back into mist. The hum quiets until only the dripping of distant water remains. When it is gone, the fog seems lighter, as though it has exhaled. For a long time, neither man speaks. Then the stranger steps toward the faint outline on the wall. He brushes away some dirt, revealing a patch of older brick beneath smoother, almost polished by countless unseen hands. The city remembers. Through touch, he says, "We leave marks we never notice. A handprint, a breath, a step. All become part of its skin." He presses his palm against the wall. For a moment, nothing happens. Then, faintly, the brick seems to respond, a low vibration, like a heartbeat behind stone. The lantern-bearer feels the hairs on his arms rise. How is that possible? The stranger looks back at him with calm eyes, because London was built on lives, not just stones. And lives never vanish completely. They echo. He lowers his hand, and the vibration fades. The silence that follows is not empty. It feels alive, like a held breath. The lantern-bearer looks around and realizes that the fog, too, has changed color from gray to a pale, almost golden hue, like morning trying to find its way into the night. "What happens now?" he asks quietly. The stranger glances once more at the mark of the door. "Now," he says, "we follow where memory leads." He takes a step back and gestures for the lantern-bearer to bring the light closer. The flame flickers across the stone, and for an instant the outline of the door glows faintly, as though drawn from within by unseen light. And then a sound, a soft click. The wall shivers, almost imperceptibly, and a thin seam appears where no seam was before. The lantern-bearer stares, heart pounding. It is opening. The stranger nods. The past always does, if you ask it gently enough. The narrow passage beyond reveals only darkness, yet it feels inviting, not foreboding. The stranger steps toward it first, his outline merging with the shadows. The lantern-bearer hesitates, casting one last glance at the empty square behind them. The fog has grown still, as if the city itself is waiting. He lifts the lantern, takes a slow breath, and follows. The wall closes behind them with a whisper, a sigh, almost human, and the light disappears into the depths. The air changes as soon as the wall seals behind them. The fog remains, but it is thinner here, no longer drifting like smoke it hovers, glowing faintly with its own quiet light. The passage stretches ahead, narrow and curved, carved from ancient stone that seems to breathe in rhythm with the city above. The lantern-bearer holds his light close, its glow dancing along the walls. He expects dust and decay, but the stone feels clean, almost polished. There is a strange warmth to it, as if it has absorbed the heat of countless hands. Faint inscriptions trace the surface, names, dates, short phrases in fading ink and soot. Some are legible, others dissolve into mystery. The stranger walks ahead with sure steps, as though he has been here before. "These tunnels are not on any map," he says softly. "They do not lead beneath buildings. They lead beneath memory itself." The lantern-bearer frowns. Memory. The stranger glances back. Every city remembers, not through words, but through places. Streets, walls, objects, all of them hold the residue of the lives that touch them. This is where London keeps what it cannot bear to lose. He slows his pace, and the two men stop before a small alcove carved into the stone. Inside rests a collection of objects, arranged with strange precision. A child's shoe, worn thin at the toe. A cracked teacup with faded blue flowers. A locket containing a lock of hair. Each item glows faintly in the lantern light, and the air around them hums softly. The lantern-bearer leans closer. "What are these remnants?" The stranger replies, "When something is loved enough, or lost enough, it leaves an echo. The city gathers those echoes here, not as ghosts, but as feelings given form." He reaches out and touches the teacup. The faint hum grows stronger, and suddenly the lantern-bearer hears something, a woman's laughter, soft and fleeting, like the memory of sunlight through lace curtains. It lasts only a second before fading back into stillness. The lantern-bearer steps back, heart pounding. "I heard her." "Yes," the stranger says quietly. The city remembers her. They continue down the corridor. Every few steps, another alcove appears, each with its own small collection of relics. A book missing its cover, a soldier's medal, a faded ribbon, a child's wooden horse. Every item hums faintly, like a note in an unseen melody. "These are London's true ghosts," the stranger murmurs. "Not the spirits that frighten or wail, those are born of guilt or fear. These are the gentle ones, the quiet echoes. They are what remain when stories end, but love does not." The lantern-bearer walks slower now, studying the walls. He can feel something in the air, not sorrow exactly, but weight. The emotional gravity of countless lives overlapping, blending into one another. He realizes that the hum he hears is not a single tone, but the layered song of a city alive with its past. At one alcove, a small journal lies open. The writing is nearly invisible. The ink bled into the paper. The stranger tilts his head. "Would you read it aloud?" The lantern-bearer hesitates, then nods. He holds the lantern close and squints at the words. It says, "Today I walked by the river again. The fog was thick, but I thought I saw his shape among the boats. I will keep coming until I do." He looks up, voice trembling slightly. "It is just sad." The stranger shakes his head. "No, it is devotion. The city remembers not because of tragedy, but because of emotion. Pain, love, hope, those are the anchors of memory." As they move deeper, the tunnel widens into a circular chamber. The air is warmer here, vibrating softly like a living heart. The walls shimmer faintly, reflecting the lantern's light in endless ripples. In the center stands a stone pedestal, covered in carvings, spirals, hands, stars, eyes. Resting atop it is a small wooden box, unadorned except for a single engraved word, "Remember." The stranger approaches with reverence. "This is the heart," he says, "the point where all memory converges. Everything the city has ever felt gathers here: the laughter, the loss, the quiet moments between." The lantern-bearer whispers, "It feels alive." "It is," the stranger replies, "because remembrance is life. Forgetting is death." He places his hand gently upon the box. The carvings around it begin to glow faintly, tracing lines of light along the stone floor. The hum deepens until it is almost melodic, not loud, but profound, a vibration that seems to reach inside the listener's chest. The lantern-bearer feels tears prick his eyes without knowing why. Then a voice rises soft, overlapping, like wind through leaves. Not one voice, but many. They speak in fragments, incomplete sentences that merge into one another. "You saw me once. He never came home. Keep the letter safe. The bells were ringing. Don't forget the river." The sound is haunting, but not cruel. It is a mosaic of memory. Every whisper, an echo of a life that mattered. The stranger bows his head, as if in prayer. The lantern-bearer, overwhelmed, asks quietly, "Do they ever rest?" The stranger looks at him, eyes calm and ancient. "They already have." Rest does not mean silence. It means being remembered. For a moment, the air shimmers like heat. The lantern-bearer feels the hum within him, and when he exhales, he senses something pass through him: warmth, sorrow, and serenity all at once. It is as if the memories themselves have acknowledged him. Slowly, the light fades. The carvings dim. The hum softens to a faint pulse beneath their feet. The city exhales, and the silence that follows feels like peace. The stranger steps back from the pedestal. "This is what London remembers," he says softly. "Not its kings or wars, but its people, the ones history forgets, but time refuses to erase. They are the true soul of the city." The lantern-bearer looks around the chamber one last time. The walls no longer seem oppressive or cold. They glow faintly, like the inside of a living being. He realizes that the fog above, the hum below, and the silence between all are part of the same thing. London breathing, endlessly. "Will it ever stop remembering?" he asks. The stranger smiles faintly. "Only when we stop caring to listen." He turns toward a passage at the far end of the chamber. The air there glows softly, like dawn seen through stone. "Come," he says. "The city has more to show." The lantern-bearer hesitates. What is beyond this place? The stranger looks back at him. Beyond memory, he says, comes understanding. And with that, they step forward into the faint light, leaving behind the hum, the relics, and the soft whispers of the forgotten, and move deeper into the story that London, patient and eternal, continues to tell. The passage grows steeper as they continue, the walls arching overhead like the ribs of some great sleeping creature. The air is damp, but strangely fragrant, a blend of old paper, candle wax, and rain-soaked stone. Their footsteps echo softly, swallowed almost instantly by the silence that follows. The deeper they descend, the more it feels as if they are walking not beneath the city, but through the city's soul itself. The lantern-bearer lifts the light higher. "Are we beneath London now?" he asks quietly. The stranger nods. Yes, beneath its surface, beneath its stories, beneath its forgetting. The tunnel opens suddenly into a vast chamber, its eyes hidden until the light reaches far enough to reveal its shape. The walls curve away in every direction, shelves carved into stone like honeycombs, each filled with small objects, thousands of them glimmers of copper, wood, fabric, and glass. The air hums faintly with the weight of unspoken memory. The lantern-bearer's breath catches. What is this place? The stranger steps forward, his voice almost reverent. The archive of the forgotten. Every life leaves something behind, a trace, a weight, a feeling too strong to fade. The city gathers them here. He gestures to the nearest shelf. On it rests a cluster of relics, a cracked pocket watch frozen at 2:13, a child's marble, dulled by time, a faded photograph of a man in uniform, whose eyes seem to follow the light. Dust lies thick on everything, but none of it feels abandoned. It feels watched over. The lantern-bearer moves closer. When he reaches out to touch the photograph, the stranger stops him gently. "Don't," he says softly. "Each memory must be respected." Touch changes them. It pulls them toward the present before they are ready. The lantern-bearer withdraws his hand, nodding. "Whose things are these?" The stranger's gaze drifts over the shelves. "They belong to no one, and to everyone. The maid who sang while sweeping the steps of a great house, the bookseller who dreamed of writing but never did, the soldier who left home with a promise he could not keep, the seamstress who stitched her hopes into every dress. They were never famous, but they built the pulse of London." The chamber feels warmer now, as though the presence of the living stirs the air. The lantern-bearer listens closely and realizes that beneath the silence lies a faint melody. Not quite music, but something like the murmuring of countless voices blending together. "Do you hear them?" the stranger asks. "Yes," the lantern-bearer whispers. "It is like the city is breathing through time," the stranger says. "The fog above carries the sound of now, but down here, every whisper the city ever held finds its echo." They move slowly between the shelves. Each alcove holds fragments of lives once vivid. A pair of spectacles missing a lens, a dried bouquet tied with blue ribbon, a leather glove small enough for a child. In one niche lies a single brass key with no lock to match. In another, a letter sealed with wax, never opened. The lantern-bearer feels the hum around each object, soft, distinct, like individual notes of a forgotten song. He senses joy in some, sorrow in others. When he passes a silver ring engraved with initials, the air around it seems almost warm, pulsing gently as if it remembers touch. The stranger pauses at a larger alcove near the center of the chamber. It holds a wooden toy horse, one wheel missing, its paint long faded. Around it the air glows faintly, golden like sunlight reflected through glass. The hum deepens into a steady, rhythmic beat, almost like a lullaby. The lantern-bearer kneels beside it. Who did it belong to? A child, the stranger says softly. One who dreamed of the river but never learned to swim. The city keeps his laughter here. And as if summoned by the words, the faintest sound rises the giggle of a boy, light and clear, echoing once before fading back into silence. The lantern-bearer's throat tightens. He closes his eyes, and for a brief instant he can see it. A sunlit afternoon by the Thames, a child running with the toy in hand, a mother watching from a distance, smiling. Then it is gone. The stranger's voice breaks the quiet. This is what the city remembers best, the moments too pure to be erased. Grief fades slower than joy, but even joy, if loved deeply enough, endures. They walk onward. The shelves rise higher, reaching toward unseen heights. The lantern's glow catches fragments of metal and bone, paper and cloth, shimmering like stars trapped in stone. Some alcoves are empty, waiting for stories not yet told. The tunnel beyond the chamber leads downward again, and they follow. The hum fades behind them, replaced by a low, rhythmic throb that seems to come from beneath their feet. The walls grow darker, the stone older, veined with streaks of black and silver. This part, the stranger says quietly, is where memory becomes instinct. The deeper you go, the more the city ceases to remember names and begins to remember feelings. The lantern-bearer frowns. Feelings. Yes, the heartbeat of existence itself, the first fire, the first dream, the first loss. They are here too faint, but eternal. The path widens into another chamber, smaller but more vivid. The walls shimmer faintly with light that seems to come from nowhere. On the floor are objects unlike the others, not physical relics, but images hovering faintly in the air, transparent and moving. A hand, writing a letter. A woman brushing her hair by candlelight. A man waiting under a lamppost that no longer exists. The lantern-bearer's voice drops to a whisper. Are they memories, too? Not memories, the stranger replies. Reflections. When the emotion of a life is strong enough, it leaves behind its motion, its habit. These are moments the city replays. Like dreams. The lantern-bearer watches one of the images. The man at the lamppost repeat his small movement endlessly, glancing down the street, then back again, waiting. The emotion is so palpable that the air around him feels heavy with expectation. Did she ever come? The lantern-bearer asks. The stranger's eyes soften. Sometimes she does, sometimes she does not. Memory shifts with the dreamer. They linger in silence for a while, surrounded by flickers of lives that shimmer and vanish like reflections on the Thames. Then, from the far wall, a faint sound, a sigh, long and deep, followed by what could almost be words. The stranger tilts his head, listening. The city's heartbeat, he murmurs. It never sleeps. The floor beneath them vibrates gently, pulsing in time with that unseen rhythm. It is neither threatening nor loud, just steady, eternal. The lantern-bearer closes his eyes and feels it through his boots, through his breath, through his chest. It is alive, he says quietly. The stranger nods. Of course it is. Cities are made of people, and people are made of stories. When enough stories intertwine, they begin to breathe together. The lantern flame flutters, but does not die. Around them, the luminous echoes of memory drift like spirits not haunting, but harmonizing, their presence both sorrowful and soothing. The stranger turns toward another archway, its edges outlined in faint gold. "Come," he says gently, "we are close to the center, the heart that ties all these stories together." The lantern-bearer takes one last look at the glowing relics, the suspended memories, the endless rhythm beneath their feet. Then he follows the stranger into the archway, the light from his lantern bending and merging with the soft gold that pulses ahead. Behind them, the chamber hums once more, not a lament, but a lullaby, as if the city itself were sighing in contentment, knowing that for one more night it had been seen. The archway leads them into a chamber that feels quieter than the others, though nothing here is truly silent. The air hums with a gentler pulse, like a heartbeat softened by distance. The lantern's glow spreads in a tender circle, revealing rows of low niches carved neatly into the stone, each niche holding a single object, placed with such care that the arrangement feels almost ceremonial. The stranger slows, as if entering a chapel. "This is where the echoes gather," he says softly. "Not the sounds of voices, but the weight of feeling. Here, the city remembers what people could not bear to forget." The lantern-bearer steps closer to the first niche. Inside lies a ribbon faded blue, fraying at the edges, tied into a careful bow that has held for decades. When the lantern light warms it, a tremor moves through the air, the faint impression of a courtyard in summer, laughter drifting over warm stone, the flick of a girl's hair as she twirls once and vanishes. The echo is not a scene so much as a feeling, a bubble of lightness that lifts the chest and then is gone. He touches the niche's rim, not the ribbon itself, and whispers, "Happiness." "Yes," the stranger replies, "joy that refused to dissolve. That is why it is here." At the next niche sits a tiny brooch in the shape of a swallow, its metal darkened by time. The instant the lantern finds it, the chamber cools by a breath. A sensation gathers, a long wait at a window, the steady scratch of rain, the whispered promise of return. The lantern-bearer inhales slowly, feeling the ache of it soft, not sharp, like a wish kept warm in the pocket of a coat for many winters. "Promise," he says. "And patience," the stranger adds. Two sides of the same echo. They move on. A pair of reading spectacles rests in another recess, one temple slightly bent. Under the light, a hush settles a study at night, lamplight falling over a hand that pauses above the page. The echo here is concentration and tenderness for the work itself, the quiet devotion of someone who believed that reading could turn a small room into a vast country. Some echoes, the stranger murmurs, are made not of great acts, but of faithful habits. Cities keep those too. They are the threads that stitch days together. The lantern-bearer nods, feeling the resonance of that thought in his own bones. He did not expect the city's memory to be so gentle. He imagined cold corridors and rattling chains. But this, he realizes, is something else, an archive of feeling. The city has curated love, loyalty, wonder, and the steady warmth of ordinary days. A wooden thimble sits alone in a shallow shelf. The moment the light touches it, the faint scent of clean cotton rises, impossible but unmistakable. The echo is all hands, hands mending, hands smoothing cloth, hands turning a garment inside out to check a seam. With it comes a ripple of pride, not grand or boastful, but the quiet satisfaction of doing something well when no one is watching. Care, says the lantern-bearer. Care that asked for nothing back, the stranger answers. They pass a small candle stub, spent to its base. The echo blooms like the last warmth of a room at night. It carries a sense of listening, of two people pausing in the middle of a sentence, because the other's silence has something to say. The lantern-bearer stands very still. The echo does not want words. It wants presence. Someone sat with someone, he says, and that sitting, the stranger replies, was the whole miracle. The chamber breathes around them. Some echoes are bright, others are weathered, softened by time. None sting. Even the ones born of sorrow feel transformed, as if the city has distilled the pain into something humane, bearable, and wise. They stop at a niche where a small paper boat rests, folded with careful fingers. The lantern light turns the paper almost translucent. The echo arrives like a tide, a child at a windowsill during rain, a puddle that becomes an ocean, a whispered launch bon voyage, and the greatness of the world contained in a palm. The lantern-bearer smiles without meaning to. Imagination, he says. The stranger's eyes warm. The city is built on that as much as on brick. Farther along, the shelves grow lower, the objects more modest still. A stub of pencil hardly longer than a thumb, a button saved in a tin, a square of fabric cut from a dress long gone. And with each, a sensation rises, the discipline of thrift, the small dignity of saving what can be saved, the art of making enough into plenty. The echoes carry pride, not deprivation. Scarcity, the lantern-bearer says softly. And ingenuity, the stranger replies. There is courage in making beauty out of less. They come upon an empty niche. No object rests in it, only dust, and a faint, circular impression left by something that was once there. The lantern-bearer frowns, lifting the light closer. An echo can move, the stranger says, answering the unspoken question. When it is called by someone above ground, someone who remembers with full heart, an echo may rise for a time to meet them. When it returns, the place keeps its imprint. The city respects its journeys. The lantern-bearer looks at the empty space a long while. He feels the shape of a memory, not his own. A doorway, a pair of arms, the wonder of being recognized after a long absence. He exhales. Recognition, he says, the kind that puts a life back together. They reach a corner where the niches climb higher. The stranger gestures to one barely within reach. Inside rests a folded letter, sealed and never opened. The lantern lingers on the wax, and the echo opens like a soft ache. The deliberate slowness of a pen, the hope in each sentence, the tremor of a signature. Alongside it, the decision not to break the seal. Perhaps the addressee knew the contents in their heart already. Perhaps the letter itself became the echo, its wholeness, the only answer it needed. Restraint, the lantern-bearer says. Mercy, the stranger counters gently. We forget how often they are the same. They walk on. A tiny glass vial catches the light empty, but holding a ghost of scent. Its echo is laughter in a mirror, joy at one's own reflection, not as vanity, but as permission to be fully alive. A small music box with a broken key hums with waltz steps imagined if not danced. A scrap of a map, its edges torn, carries a compass of longing north, becomes not a direction but a vow. The lantern-bearer's pace, slows to a near halt. He is not tired. He is absorbed. The echoes do not flood him. They ring in clear tones that fade with grace. He recognizes something of himself in each one, his own quiet hopes, his own daily devotions, the people he has loved. He wonders, not with fear but with curiosity, what trace of his life might someday hum in a stone recess like these. Does every life leave an echo, he asks, eyes on the shelves. If it loved or was loved, the stranger says, the city remembers the exchange, not the ledger. A tremor runs through the floor, gentle, like the ripple of a breath. The chamber dims and brightens once, as if blinking. The stranger tilts his head, listening. It is shifting, he says. The echoes are aligning. What does that mean? That their song is about to change key. The lantern-bearer waits, unsure what to expect, and then hears it. The harmonies of the room overtone into something fuller. The echoes that were separate, joy, patience, care, imagination, begin to braid. The chamber's hum deepens in color, shaded now with the resonance of shared life. He feels it in his chest as a fullness bordering on tears, though nothing here is sad. It is enormous. It is kind. The city remembers people together, the stranger says, not as isolated stories, but as a choir. Every echo is a note, and the song is the whole, the living idea that no moment was wasted. The lantern-bearer closes his eyes, letting the sound travel through him. He feels the ribbon's laughter link to the candle's presence, the spectacles, devotion to the thimble's care. The paper boat's imagination floats on the tide of the unopened letter's mercy. Scarcity's ingenuity ties a bow in someone's hair, and the empty niche recognition returns as a refrain. You are known, you are known, you are known. When he opens his eyes, the chamber seems gently brighter, though the lantern has not changed. Why show me this? He asks, voice low. Because fear misunderstands haunting. The stranger answers, most of what lingers does so out of love. Cities keep teaching this lesson, but we forget. On nights like this, we are invited to remember. A final row of niches curves toward a narrow door of stone, no handle, only a seam. In the last recess sits a simple house key. Its iron is worn smooth, and yet it gleams as if newly made. The echo it carries is unmistakable. Return. The relief of a latch turning at dusk. The quiet click of safety. The knowledge that inside a light waits. The lantern-bearer cannot help it. He reaches out, then stops, his hand hovering, remembering the stranger's caution. The key hums once, a small, consenting sound, and the seam in the stone door loosens. A breath of warmer air slips through. The stranger inclines his head. They are ready to show you the room that echo opens. What room is that? The one every city hides in its heart, he says, where the remembered become remembrance, where love is not a feeling but an architecture. The door slides inward without touch. Beyond it lies a soft light like morning through curtains, and the promise of further understanding, the kind that does not wound, but mends. Come, the stranger says, and for the first time his voice carries a shade of joy. The choir has rehearsed long enough. It is time you heard the song as a whole. The lantern-bearer steps forward, the key's echo still warm against his palm, though he never picked it up. Behind them, the chamber releases a long, contented sigh, as if the city, indulged and understood, settles a little deeper into its breathing. and then they cross the threshold, carrying with them a single, luminous certainty that the past is not a weight to drag, but a light to carry small, steady, and enough to find the way. The light beyond the door feels different, softer, almost golden, as though the underground air itself has learned to glow. The lantern-bearer steps inside, the sound of his boots muted by the thick stone floor. The stranger follows in silence, his shadow long and sharp behind him. At first, the new chamber looks empty, but as the lantern's glow adjusts, forms begin to appear, walls covered in faint carvings, arches rising like cathedral ribs, and pools of water reflecting the faint shimmer of unseen light. It feels less like a room and more like a sanctuary carved by time itself. The lantern-bearer turns slowly, his voice hushed. "It feels peaceful." "It is," the stranger replies. "This is where fear ends its shape. The city teaches this truth. Everything that begins in fear must end in understanding, or it never truly leaves." The words echo softly, dissolving into the chamber's warm stillness. The lantern-bearer lowers his light and looks into one of the shallow pools. Ripples spread slowly from his reflection, and in the ripples he sees other faces, brief, transparent, like memories surfacing through time. Some are smiling, others are solemn, but none are afraid. "These are the faces of those who once feared," the stranger says, as though reading his thought. "Every one of them learned that what they fled from was not darkness, but memory." When we stop running, the shadows soften. The lantern-bearer nods slowly, still watching the faces fade and reform. "You mean all those ghosts we imagine are just the things we have not understood yet?" "Exactly. Fear is remembrance without clarity. It is the echo of what we avoid." He crouches near the pool, touching the water with a gloved hand. "When we face what frightened us, the grief, the guilt, the unknown, it no longer hunts us. It becomes part of our song." City knows this better than anyone. It has spent centuries turning fear into wisdom. The lantern-bearer looks around the chamber again. He notices that the carvings on the walls are not random. They depict scenes, people comforting each other, a figure guiding another through darkness, a child holding an elder's hand. None of it looks grand or divine. It looks human, profoundly, beautifully human. "These are the city's lessons," the stranger explains. "Every fear the people ever carried of death, of loss, of being forgotten, the city absorbed, learned from, and softened. The more it remembered, the less it feared." He gestures toward the carvings. "That is why the fog above feels alive. It is not trying to scare the living. It is carrying the city's empathy back to them. What the world calls haunting, London calls remembering." The lantern-bearer traces one of the carvings with his eyes. "Then maybe all ghosts are just misunderstood memories." The stranger smiles faintly. "Precisely. Every haunting is a lesson waiting to be translated." In the center of the chamber stands a low stone table. On it rests a single object, a cracked mirror, framed in brass darkened with age. The stranger gestures toward it. "This," he says, "is the heart of fear." The lantern-bearer frowns. "A mirror?" "Yes," the stranger replies, "because fear is nothing more than reflection of ourselves, of what we have done, of what we have left undone." He tilts the lantern so its light touches the glass. The mirror's surface ripples once, then steadies. In it, the lantern-bearer sees his own face, pale, uncertain, but calm. Then the reflection shifts. He sees the alleys they walked through, the relics they passed, the faces in the fog all mirrored back like a living memory. The stranger's voice is low. The city remembers us as much as we remember it. The fear we feel when walking through its fog is not terror. It is recognition. We see ourselves reflected in what the city has kept. The lantern-bearer watches as his reflection flickers. For a moment he sees himself as a child, running down a narrow lane, laughing in rain. Then he sees himself older, holding a hand that slips away. The mirror does not accuse, it forgives. A deep calm settles over him. The weight he did not know he carried begins to lift. The stranger breaks the silence. You see now why the city never sleeps. It is not restlessness, it is devotion. It listens to every echo, waiting for the moment fear transforms. The lantern-bearer glances up, and if people stopped fearing, then the city would finally rest. But humanity never stops fearing, not completely, and that is all right. Fear keeps us moving, but understanding keeps us whole. He turns from the mirror and gestures to the surrounding carvings. Each one of these images was born from fear. Fear of death, fear of forgetting, fear of being alone. Yet look at them. Every figure here is touching another. Fear ended where compassion began. The lantern-bearer studies the nearest carving again. It shows two figures kneeling side by side, one holding a small lantern between them. The flame is carved in gold leaf, still glinting despite the years. The image feels familiar, like a reflection of the two of them standing here now. Every generation walks this path. The stranger says, every soul learns this truth, that fear can't survive recognition. Once you see it clearly, it turns into understanding, and that understanding becomes light. The lantern-bearer smiles faintly. Maybe that is why we carry lanterns. The stranger nods. Exactly, so not to chase away the dark, but to learn what the dark is made of. The air shifts again, softer now, almost tender. From the cracks in the stone floor, faint threads of golden mist rise and swirl around them. They move like smoke, yet shine like sunlight on water. The stranger closes his eyes, breathing it in. The city's memory is breathing again, he murmurs. It is pleased we have listened. The lantern-bearer feels warmth. Touch his face. The golden mist curls around him, carrying scents he can't quite name: old wood, wet earth, lavender, parchment. It feels like every comforting memory he has ever had merging into one moment. He looks at the stranger. What happens now? The stranger opens his eyes, and for the first time, the lantern-bearer sees something behind them, light. Not reflected light, but something internal, ancient and calm. Now, he says, you walk forward without fear, because you have seen what lies beneath it. The golden light pulses once like a heartbeat. The fog that has followed them all night softens, thinning until the chamber glows as bright as dawn. The carvings shimmer. The air hums with the quiet music of everything that has ever been understood. The lantern-bearer lowers his light. For the first time, it is unnecessary. The city is luminous on its own. As they turn to leave, the stranger speaks once more, his voice a whisper that feels both near and infinite. Remember this, he says, every shadow you fear has a story. Listen long enough, and you will find that the story always ends with love. The lantern-bearer nods, understanding now that the entire journey, the fog, the silence, the apparitions, has not been about haunting at all. It has been about remembrance, empathy, and the quiet work of transforming fear into compassion. When they step back through the passage, the light does not fade. The fog outside has changed to thinner, golden, as if the whole city has begun to glow from within. The stranger walks ahead, his silhouette clear at last, no longer swallowed by mist. The lantern-bearer follows, lantern unlit, heart steady, eyes open. And behind them London breathes, calm, watchful, eternal, remembering not the fear of its people, but the light they left behind. The fog outside has thinned to a faint gold, drifting like breath over the quiet streets. London no longer feels haunted or hidden. It feels awake. The lantern-bearer and the stranger walk side by side now, their pace unhurried, their steps echoing softly through alleys that seem less narrow than before. The air has changed. Even the silence feels kind. For a long while neither man speaks. The city speaks for them, the gentle creak of a shutter, the drip of rain from eaves, the low hum beneath the stones. Everything sounds alive, as if each corner, each forgotten wall, has joined the quiet conversation. The lantern-bearer finally breaks the silence. "So this is what the city has been trying to tell us," he says softly. "That memory is not a weight, but a voice." The stranger nods. Yes, the voice of everything that once was, still speaking. The living and the dead are not divided by time, only by attention. They stop at a crossroad. The faint wind carries the smell of damp earth, iron, and roses, the perfume of London's layered history. The lantern-bearer looks around, seeing things he had not noticed before. A carving above a doorway worn smooth by centuries of touch, a patch of moss shaped like a handprint, a window where candlelight trembles, as if remembering laughter. "It is strange," he murmurs. "I have walked these streets my whole life, but tonight they look different." "They have not changed," says the stranger. "You have. Once you understand what memory truly is, every street becomes sacred. Every silence becomes a story waiting to be heard." They walk again, passing through a square where the fog hovers low over cobblestones. The city feels older and younger at once, like it is being reborn from its own remembering. The stranger gestures toward the air around them. This is what people forget about the past. It is not gone. It lingers in gestures, in choices, in love left unfinished. History does not stay in books. It breathes through us. The lantern-bearer listens, the weight of the words settling deep. "So when people tell stories," he says slowly, "they are not keeping the past alive. They are letting it live again." "Yes?" the stranger answers, smiling faintly. "Every story is a door. Every act of remembering opens it a little wider." They pass a bakery, its shutters closed. Through the gap beneath the door, a thin line of warm light spills into the fog. The lantern-bearer imagines the baker preparing for dawn, shaping loaves in the quiet before the world wakes. The smell of flour and yeast blends with the faint scent of soot. Life continues, layer upon layer, like the city's own breath. The stranger watches him. "You see now how the living feed the memory of the dead," he says. "Every kindness you offer, every word you speak with care, it becomes part of what endures. The city does not remember monuments. It remembers gestures." The lantern-bearer turns his head. "Gestures." The stranger nods. The mother who covered her child's face from the rain, the friend who waited by the river until dawn, the man who gave away his last coin and told no one. These are the threads that tie centuries together. Humanity is made of them. The lantern-bearer breathes deeply, his chest rising and falling with quiet awe. He realizes that the entire journey, the alley, the fog, the hum, beneath the streets has been preparing him for this. The understanding that remembrance is not about ghosts or sorrow, but connection. The living carry the echoes of the dead not as burden, but as guidance. They stop beside a bridge. The river below moves slowly, its surface catching faint reflections of light. The water looks alive, full of muted color. The stranger leans on the railing, his eyes distant. When people forget, cities grow cold, he says, but when they remember, even the stones begin to glow. Memory is how we keep the world warm. The lantern-bearer sets his lantern down on the railing. The flame inside flickers once, then steadies. "I think I understand now," he says quietly. "It is not the ghosts that haunt us. It is the love we leave unfinished." The stranger smiles, a smile that carries both age and relief. "And now you see what the city's been trying to teach for centuries. Memory is not meant to chain you to the past. It is meant to remind you that love has no expiry. It moves forward just as time does." A church bell rings somewhere in the distance, not solemnly, but gently, as if acknowledging their understanding. The fog rises and falls in rhythm with the sound, the light trembling across the river's surface like a heartbeat. The lantern-bearer closes his eyes. He feels not fear, but gratitude. Gratitude for the unseen faces, the relics, the whispers that filled the tunnels below. Gratitude for the quiet truth that everything touched by love, however small, leaves a trace. He whispers, "Maybe this is what eternity really is, being remembered with kindness." The stranger places a hand on his shoulder. That is the only eternity that matters. They stand there for a while, listening to the bell fade into the distance. The city seems to sigh, content. The fog lifts a little more, revealing rooftops, chimneys, the faint glimmer of dawn stretching over the horizon. The stranger straightens his coat and looks toward the brightening sky. "Morning is coming," he says softly. "My part of the journey ends with the night. Yours begins with the day." The lantern-bearer blinks. "You are leaving." "I was never meant to stay," the stranger says. "I walk where memory calls. When understanding is found, my path moves on." The lantern-bearer wants to ask his name, but the words catch in his throat. Somehow he already knows that names do not matter here. What matters is the knowing, the shared silence, the recognition. The stranger steps back, his form already thinning into the light. "Keep walking," he says. "Listen to what the streets say when no one else does. Tell their stories. Let memory breathe through your words." And then he is gone. Not vanished, but dissolved like fog into sunlight, like a song into silence that still hums after it ends. The lantern-bearer stands by the river a long time, watching the light spill wider across the water. He picks up his lantern. The flame inside burns brighter than before, golden and steady. He realizes that he no longer carries it to see, he carries it to remember. Behind him, the city awakens. Somewhere, a window opens. Somewhere else, a door creaks, footsteps echo, laughter stirs. London, ancient and infinite, exhales again, alive, aware, and full of stories. The lantern-bearer takes his first step toward the waking streets, his shadow stretching ahead like a bridge between past and present. And though the fog lingers, it no longer hides. It reveals. As he walks, the hum of the city follows him, the low, eternal rhythm of lives overlapping, of memories intertwined. For the first time, he understands. The city remembers not because it must, but because it loves. And on this quiet morning after a haunted night, that love is enough to make even the stones glow. The first light of dawn rises over the rooftops, pale and slow, washing the fog in gold and rose. The lantern-bearer walks alone now, his shadow trailing behind him like a companion made of memory. The streets, once mysterious and veiled, are familiar again, yet something in them has changed. The silence that once felt heavy now feels full, alive with quiet presence. The air carries not the chill of night, but the warmth of understanding. He moves through streets he has crossed 1,000 times, but each corner feels reborn. The shop signs, the lampposts, the worn stones underfoot, they all seem to breathe differently, as though the city has exhaled its centuries of held breath. The fog lingers like a gentle veil, no longer ominous, but affectionate, curling around his shoulders like an old friend who has waited patiently for him to listen. The lantern in his hand burns steadily, its light soft but sure. He no longer needs it to see. He carries it now as one carries a symbol not of survival, but of remembrance. The flame is not for pushing back the dark. It is for keeping the night alive within him, even as day arrives. The city wakes around him. A milk cart rattles down the street. A door opens, releasing the scent of bread and warmth. From a window above, a child's laugh floats down, pure and bright, carrying into the mist. Life continues. Always it continues. Yet beneath the noise of morning, there remains a low, steady hum, the song of the city's memory, still breathing, soft and infinite. The lantern-bearer pauses before the mouth of an alley. He recognizes it, narrow, damp, the same place where he first met the stranger. The fog there is lighter now, as if relieved of its burden. The walls glisten, not with cold, but with moisture touched by sunrise. He steps closer and bows his head slightly, a quiet gesture of thanks. The memory of the stranger, his calm voice, his steady hands, his eyes like old lamplight lingers in the air. "You were right," the lantern-bearer whispers. Fear ends where understanding begins. His words seem to echo faintly back to him, carried by the fog, as if the city itself is answering. The sound is neither whisper nor voice, just a soft resonance, a sigh that says yes. He continues walking toward the river. The sky brightens, and the last of the fog drifts upward, becoming light. The Thames gleams like liquid silver. The reflection of the rising sun shimmers across the water, touching the bridge, the railings, the spires. For a moment, the whole city glows as though lit from within. He stops on the bridge, resting his lantern on the stone ledge. The light inside catches on the surface of the water, creating two flames, one real, one reflected. He watches them flicker together, inseparable, each feeding the other's glow, the living and the remembered, side by side. He closes his eyes and lets the morning wash over him. The cool breeze carries with it the scents of coal, rain, and something softer, lavender perhaps, or old paper. It feels like the breath of every life that has ever passed through these streets. And he knows now that this is the true nature of London, not its monuments, not its power, but its heart. A heart made of echoes and stories, of compassion woven into stone. He speaks quietly, more to the wind than to himself. We think cities are built of stone and wood, but really they are built of people, of moments, every kindness, every sorrow, every small act of love. That is what lasts. The words float outward and disappear into the fog. but he knows they will be heard. The city listens. It always has. He lifts the lantern one last time. Its flame trembles in the wind, then steadies. "This light is not mine," he says softly. "It belongs to everyone who came before and everyone still to come." The morning sun catches the brass rim of the lantern, and for an instant the light seems to merge flame and dawn, becoming one. When he looks again, he realizes he no longer needs to carry it. The city itself has taken up the glow. Every window, every puddle, every glint of metal reflects it. London, once shrouded in shadow, now shines gently from within. He sets the lantern down on the edge of the bridge and steps back. The flame burns on, unmoving, as the light of day grows stronger around it. A passing breeze stirs the water, scattering the reflection into ripples that dance like gold threads. As he turns to leave, he glances over his shoulder one last time. The lantern stands where he left it, small, simple, but luminous, and behind it, the city stretches out in endless layers of mist and memory. The hum beneath his feet is quieter now, like a heartbeat at rest. He smiles, a quiet, knowing smile, and whispers, "Rest well, old city. You have remembered enough for now." Then he walks toward the waking streets, his steps light, his heart steady. The echoes follow him not as ghosts, but as music, threading through his thoughts. He feels the presence of those who walked before him, their stories merging with his own. And as he disappears into the brightness of the morning, London itself seems to whisper back a voice woven from thousands of others, tender and eternal. We are here. We are remembered. We are one. The last of the fog lifts. The river gleams. The day begins. The city, at peace, breathes on. As the sun climbs higher over the awakening city, the lantern-bearer pauses one last time at the edge of the street. Behind him lies a night filled with whispers, revelations, and a truth older than the stones themselves, that fear fades when remembered with love, and that memory is the soul of every city, every human heart. The fog, now gilded by sunlight, curls upward like smoke from a candle just extinguished, carrying with it the last traces of mystery and the first warmth of understanding. He takes a deep breath and smiles. What began as a haunted night has become a gentle lesson that ghosts are not curses, but messages, that history is not heavy but sacred, and that every act of remembrance keeps the light alive. The stranger's voice echoes faintly in his mind. Soft as breath, listen, and you will understand. The city remembers because you do. He looks once more at London, its bridges, its towers, its endless hum, and knows that he has become part of its memory too. Every step he takes from now on will carry a piece of this night, glowing quietly inside him. And as he turns toward the rising sun, he speaks not to anyone in particular, but to all who will someday walk these streets, searching for meaning in the fog. Thank you for walking beside me through this story, through the quiet alleys of memory, and into the light of understanding. Wherever you are, may you carry your own lantern, not to chase away the dark, but to see what it is made of. Because sometimes, even in the deepest shadow, you will find that what is waiting to be discovered is love. He nods gently toward the dawn, his voice warm and calm. Goodbye, my friends. Until the next story, may your path be kind, your memories gentle, and your light steady. The lantern flame glows one last time, then folds softly into the morning air. The city exhales, alive and eternal. The story ends, but the remembering never does.